My name is Fortino Morales, and I am the director of the art garden at UC Riverside. And I usually like to start my slides or presentations with a little bit of history about who I am, why I'm up here talking to you all. And so part of that goes back a little bit to my history, my grandparents coming over through the Bracero program, which is the guest worker program with Mexico and the US. So when World War II happened, a lot of the US folks went over to war, and so they needed extra help on the field, and they brought in Mexican workers to do that. And so that's how my ancestry came over here. So they followed crops all the way from the south, all the way up and down to California and to Washington State. They ended up settling up in Washington State. And so I talk about that partly because like when I started showing pictures of me in the fields and in the garden, and my grandpa saw that, he was like, "What are y'all doing in the field? Like, did you drop out of school? What's going on? Like, why? Like, you work in the field if you're not going to school, if you're not doing that." So he was trying to understand that. And my mom had to kind of like share, like, no, he's still in school. He's doing this, for sustainability and for school as part of that. So. And then, so that's just a little bit of background on me. Oh, I also did environmental science as an undergrad at UC Riverside, and then also just finishing up my master's in public policy from Riverside as well. So this is the other slide that I like to start with. This is the petition that we started with back in 2007, 2009. Our student group, Sustainable UCR, this is kind of the genesis of the garden. We went from this petition to 4.5 acres, a staff position that I now have been in for 5 years, and yeah, 4.5 acres. So just kind of give you an idea of what's possible. And I know it sounds like y'all are getting started with a new campus farm too, so just like keep the hope alive and keep going. So we started with Sustainable UCR, which is a student org on campus, and then also with the Salvation Army. Both groups were kind of independently wanting to start a garden. We were interested in the sustainable aspect of it, and then the Salvation Army was really interested in like the food access part of it. So this was like 2008, 2009, during the whole economic crisis that was going down. And so they saw like a big influx of families that kind of came out to their food box program, but they only had dry and canned goods, and they wanted to be able to give like fresh produce to them, especially because they started seeing kids and like whole families coming. So the Salvation Army approached the university like, look, you're an agricultural school, maybe we can work some kind of community garden program out. And then the university was like, actually, there's a student group that wants to do it too. How about we just get in a room together and we'll make something happen. So the university did that. And we all got in the room, and what came out of that was this 1/4 acre lot. And the idea was that it was going to be a pilot program, so a 2-year program where we had 40 plots there, a 1/4 acre. Do you know the size of the place that y'all are looking at? 1,300. Okay. Okay, I think it's near that, yeah. And so that's what we started with, and the idea was a pilot program. That size, yeah. And they knew that they were going to be putting a building here. And so they're like, we'll give it to you for 2 years. We're not going to build a building for 2 years. So you have it, see if there's interest, see if you can get a program running, and kind of go from there. We were able to kind of start right away. Here on campus, they have ESLP. Do they still have that? Education for Sustainable Living program, or no? No? Okay, so. Maybe not.
That sounds really familiar, but I don't think we do.
So on a lot of the UC campuses, they had a program called ESLP, or in Berkeley, they had what was called DECAL. And so these are classes that students create. So they come up with their own syllabus, they come up with their own topics, and then they host their own class. And so other students can kind of take, it's a 1-unit class, so you can, they have one on Harry Potter, they have one on, we do one on the garden, but kind of like a wide range of stuff. But we decided to create a class around the garden. And so we did that for 2 years, and we brought in experts. This is Marge, our compost worm expert in the community. And so we brought in both faculty that knew about agriculture to kind of share what they were doing, but then we also brought in folks in the community that had a lot of knowledge too. She's been doing composting for like 20, 30 years, and so just has like a really good knowledge around that. So that was really important to us though too, like kind of philosophically, is to recognize that like not all knowledge is just coming from the university, but there's a lot of knowledge in the community as well. And so bringing that in as part of that too. And so as part of that class, we were both learning about like how to grow a tomato, how to do that type of thing, but we were also learning about like the theory around it, right? So like in terms of food systems and what's going on in the area. So this is a map of Riverside. Is it anyone from that area? Like, no? Okay. Just checking. So this is the outline of the city of Riverside. And this is one of the things that we found out in that course that we were teaching, was that, it's kind of hard to see here, but the red dots are what are considered to be food deserts by the USDA. And that's the university. So from the university to the downtown area, there's 2 food deserts. And this is one thing that we were kind of trying to wrestle with, was the idea that we're a land-grant university that focuses on agricultural research. We have 500 acres on site working on agriculture. And our nearest neighbor is a food desert. So in a food desert, it means that there's low access to fresh produce and low socioeconomic standing. So those 2 factors kind of create that. So we were like, that's kind of weird, right? I mean, we have like multi-million-dollar research going on, and the community right next to it is a food desert. So the idea was to kind of start to bridge that, and make that connection within the community as well. So we knew that when we were starting our garden, that it wasn't just going to be for the students, and it wasn't just going to be for the campus, but it was also going to be for the community as well. So, and digging deeper into that, we started getting into what was going on in the city. So you can kind of see this little triangle here, and maybe I'll go back. And it's this little triangle right there. They call it the green belt in the city of Riverside, and it's about 5,000 acres that have been, protected for agriculture and designated as agriculture, so it can't be developed into plazas or anything like that. And it was actually passed back in '79 by a group of environmentalist women and lawyers that kind of came up to created this because they saw that there was a lot of development and that type of thing, but they wanted to keep agriculture as a part of Riverside's history. And so that they passed that, and it's been in agriculture since then. But if you notice, you'll see that a lot of it's been kind of declining, and all the yellow spots are vacant or fallow, so they're not being used. And it's about, well, I think it's right now it's about, I think it's still around there. It's around 800 acres that are just fallow, just not being used of agricultural land. And so we're seeing this, right? So we're a land-grant university. We have 4 food deserts within the city of Riverside, and we have almost 1,000 acres of fallow land. So we're like, oh, this is kind of starting to form what we're doing on campus and seeing how it can possibly translate off of campus as well. So after those 2 years were up, after the pilot program, the university actually in the 3rd year kind of stopped talking to the students and communicating. And they eventually ended up turning off the water to the garden. And so there was a little bit of contention. As you can imagine, the students had that course that I was telling you about. They're going to be hosting in the spring quarter, but the water was shut off in the fall. So they're like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to have a garden class but not have a garden? And so what they did is they spent that class really organizing around the idea of having the garden on site and moving to a more permanent location. And so this was the culmination. This is their final, actually. It was to do a rally at the base of the bell tower, which is kind of our center of the campus, the center of the campus. And so the university heard that they were going to have a big rally at the base of the campus, and then all of a sudden they started calling the students and emailing them like, hey, yeah, maybe we could talk or maybe we could chat for just 15 minutes. And the students at that time, they were like, no, we'll talk to you after our rally, which is pretty cool. I mean, for students to kind of to know that and to kind of do that. And so they hosted this event there, kind of outlining why we needed a garden on the campus. And 2 weeks after that, there was a meeting set up, and that's where we got into our 3 acres. Sorry, we started with 3 acres. So this is actually a shot of our opening day. And so this is, there's actually the chancellor's there, the mayor's there, professors are there, students are there to kind of help celebrate that. And we're planting the first row of cover crops. And cover cropping is really about kind of like rebuilding the soil. They hadn't really planted anything there for maybe 10 years or so. So it's just barren soil. And ecologically, you know that that's not a good thing to have for your soil. So we wanted to get some organic matter and get some cover crops in there right away. Yeah, so this is our big kind of opening day that we planted out there. And then this is kind of overview, design of it that we did in that first year. We're going into our 6th year, so we're updating this actually. And it doesn't look exactly like this. If y'all know anything about like getting projects on the line, your design and what actually happens sometimes don't look the same. And so we do have this whole southern section are about 40 community garden plots. That center areas where we have events, it doesn't look like that. We didn't have like funds to kind of get the like an outdoor classroom and kind of a covered area. So it just kind of, that's where we host all our events. So we have different things like Native Jam Night every fall, which we work with the Native American student programs on our campus. And we have a big kind of big event. They have music and bird singers and booths out and food, and and bonfires and that type of thing. That's the other thing that's nice about the garden and where we're at, is that we're pretty far away from campus, so we can have fires, and like all that permitting stuff is a little bit easier to kind of work with, because the fire marshal's like, you're not gonna burn anything down or anything like that, so it's kind of nice. We've also done in that area like a camping 101. So for people that have never gone camping before, they can come out, learn how to like pitch a tent, learn how to like pick gear, and then also how to cook on an open fire too. So it's a pretty versatile space in terms of not just being about a garden, but just kind of general outdoor environmental kind of education as well. And then on the north side, we have row crops, and that's actually where we work with the pantry on our campus. I think y'all call it the food bank here on campus. And that's about a half an acre that we grow exclusively for the pantry on our campus. So I think just this year we've done about 1,000 pounds, or since March we've done about 1,000 pounds of lettuce, and we have like 7 different types of lettuces and greens for them. And we have a crew of 7 interns that work out there with us too, and they're all paid internships too. We were pretty big on that, like wanting to make sure that people get paid to do, especially if you've done garden or farm work. It can be pretty hard and difficult. There's a story that one of the interns that came out to, because we do application process and interviews and stuff like that, and we get like 90 or so like people applying to it. One of the top 3 candidates, they came out in like heels and a skirt because they thought it was like an office type thing, and we were just like, because it's really like uneven, and it's in a garden, you know. But it was cool. She kicked off her shoes and kind of got dirty right away, and ended up getting the job later too. So, but yeah, it is, and it's Riverside. So if people don't know about Riverside, it gets pretty hot out there. In the summer, it can be over 100 for a good couple weeks straight. So we try to get started at 7, finish up by 11, because by then it's already 90, in the high 90s. So you definitely want to get people paid for doing that type of work. Cool. Oh, and then, sorry, the other thing is that we have in this area, those 2 squares, those are actually, one's a warehouse and one's a greenhouse. The greenhouse, we actually recently just got a grant in the last year or so for $174,000 to rebuild it. And we're also doing, it's a solar greenhouse, so the solar panels the greenhouse itself is like made of solar panels that are transparent. And so it functions as a greenhouse and as a solar panel like generation. The idea and the goal is to have it completely off the grid, and we're working with our engineering students to kind of do that too. So it's not just like environmental science or botany students that are out there. In fact, the students that really got the whole program started really came from the Women's Studies department on our campus, which eventually turned into Gender and Sexuality Studies. And the one thing that we like to kind of joke about is that they created the sustainability major under the Gender and Sexuality Studies, and I think it's the only one in the nation that has that. So typically sustainability is under like geology or environmental science, but this one's under Gender and Sexuality Studies, which is pretty cool. And we're pretty sure we're a big influence in doing that because all the students that were involved in this project were in that department and kind of before they made that change, so it's kind of cool. And then, so I was mentioning food security issues off campus with Salvation Army and with the food desert, the 4 food deserts in the community, but then in 2015, they came out with a study around student food insecurity as well, so looking on campus as well. And so UCR, we're pretty consistently in the 60s or the high 50s in terms of the studies. And so for our campus, we have about 20,000 undergrads. So that means about almost 10,000 of our students are food insecure on some level, looking at the USDA's kind of metrics for that. And so we started realizing, well, we need to do a lot more on our campus as well. Part of that study was also this, was realizing, I don't know, are you all familiar with the food security, food stuff on campus that's been going on? A little bit, kind of? Okay. Well, this is one of the other studies that came out, and this was looking at frequency of skipping meals, worried about whether or not being able to pay for them. And as students, and a recent student, it was like, this is how things are. But I think for the staff and the faculty and the administration, like seeing these numbers was like a kind of a big shock for them. And this study was tying it directly actually to GPA. So if you've taken statistics classes and you're looking at studies, the little dots on the end are talking about how they're statistically significant and that they're negatively correlated. So if you experience food insecurity, what they're saying here is that it's negatively correlated to your GPA. And so they do have studies on that showing that. And so that's one of the reasons why, we're trying to kind of get the university to think about it in terms of not just like, well, we need to kind of help students, but it's like it affects GPA, it affects things afterwards as well. And then, so this is just kind of like an outline of what we've been doing on our campus for the last year. And it's kind of busy, but there's a little bit of a logic to it. And one of our GFI fellows, the Global Food Initiative, are y'all familiar with that one too, or a little bit? I think they're releasing the fellowships pretty soon for people to get signed up on those. They're out right now? Yeah. So one of our GFI fellows helped kind of create this diagram here. But so everything on the top is kind of community outreach and stuff that goes out to the community. We didn't get funded to the full amount, so we didn't do all of these things, but we have done field trips to different farms, and then we also did attend our Grow Riverside conference, which is kind of like the different, like what the city's hosting in terms of bringing together a bunch of food and ag people. And then like I was mentioning, we have that R course where students teach it every quarter. We have a video project that students are working on right now, and then we're gearing up to work with a high school summer program, which is pretty cool too. And then this is us visiting the UC Santa Cruz farm. Has anyone been to that farm over there? Oh yeah? Cool. So that's like a 30-acre organic farm. They have 40 apprentices there. They've been there since like the 70s. It's nice. It's beautiful. It's nice. I'd recommend it. Especially if you're interested in like campus farms and gardens, definitely go check it out. And even if you're not, if you're ever at Santa Cruz, it's definitely worth checking out. So we got to travel up there in two bus loads. We went up there and kind of got to spend a weekend there learning about all the different things, the different programs that they were working on up there. And this was this week. we got our first tractor. We were pretty excited about it, and so this is one of the interns getting trained on how to operate the tractor. So we just expanded from 3 acres to 4.5, and with that expansion, we're realizing like that's where you start to get to the limits of how much you can do by hand and how much you want to like stress students out and like put them through a lot of pain. And so a tractor is really helpful when just kind of doing a lot of the different tasks, but it's also just a cool way to like, it's something that they're like all excited to put that on their resume, and I was like, that's kind of weird. But you can put like you know how to operate a tractor. But yeah, so I don't know if that's how, I don't know if that's something in the plans, but it becomes useful. And then just talking a little bit about the organization of the garden. So kind of asked to kind of talk a little bit about like what that's like and what our program is. So we have, it's kind of broken up into 3 tiers. We have the academic, which is our undergraduate education, and we have a steering committee, which I'll show right now, or the next slide. Operationally, we have a College of Agriculture, so College of Natural Sciences and Agricultural Science, College of Natural and Agricultural Sciences is our CNAS program. And then I am hired through Ag Ops, which is Agriculture Operations, and we're the department that we're the campus farmers essentially. So there's 500 acres on site on our campus that's just dedicated to agriculture research. And the professors aren't going to really be out there kind of like spraying and watering and trimming the trees and stuff like that. So our department is the one that kind of does all that for them so that they can come out and do the measurements and stuff. So, and then financially, the provost is the one that's been funding the garden. And then I've been able to get grants throughout the years as well. And then the student affairs helps with like all the different events that we host out there as well. So, and then the academic steering committee. So this is basically one of the things that we created with the garden as well, just so that we have support on campus. Because like I was mentioning, the students kind of had to fight the administration a little bit back in 2012. And this is kind of a way to kind of get everybody on the same page and then also just kind of move forward together. So we have representatives from almost every college and different departments on campus, or our sustainability department, School of Public Policy, and then even alumni, which has been kind of cool. So alumni of the garden, like the original garden crew that started the garden, have come back to be advisors, the ones that are still around. And then we also have a representative from the city that's also there. And that's really helpful for making those kind of partnerships. Like I was saying, like trying to get involved in the community as well. So, cool, let's see. And then, so what's it all done? Like, what have we done in all that time? It's been, we started that first garden in 2009. We broke ground in a smaller one. And then we broke ground in this new space in 2012. From there, we went from a 1/4 acre to 4.5 acres. We have a staff position. We're hoping to get more because 4.5 acres is a lot to manage. And then also to do programming and events like that too. And then we've created the R Course program. So students are teaching classes every quarter. And the fun thing is that like whoever the students are that are going to teach that class get to create their own curriculum. So like no class ever looks the same. So we have students that are in the sustainability program. We have students that are in we have engineering students. We have a history major student. So the class will look different every single time, which is a lot of fun. We've also, like I was mentioning, inspired the sustainability major. We have 7 paid internships through our version of TGIF. So it's like a student green fee. Does TGIF fund like student internships? Yeah. So that was one way for us to kind of help get things going and started, was to have that type of funding. We have been involved actually in those 5 years in starting other not campus gardens, but gardens in the city. So working with like nonprofits in the area, working actually with other cities as well, and like consulting and sharing like how we got our garden started. And then lastly, yeah, we were really excited with the new acreage that we were able to kind of grow about 1,000 pounds for them. We still have a lot more going. It's just the lettuce came in first. So, and then what's coming up? What are we thinking about next? that's the beginning farmer training program is one that we're looking at. So like I was mentioning with the 5,000 acres, we have a lot of land in the area that we could definitely kind of use new, like new students and new people kind of getting involved in that. A lot of the people in that area, like nationally, I think the average age of a farmer is like around 60. So in thinking about who's going to be farming next, like in the next 10 years, and we don't really have a good, strong cohort of young people taking up that skill, and we don't, we're not necessarily teaching it in that same way. The other thing is that farming knowledge and gardening knowledge, it takes a long time. I've had other like farm mentors come out and they're like telling me that it takes about 10 years for you to know what, like to feel like you know what you're doing on a farm operation. And so that's a long time, right? If you think about even like undergraduate career, it's like 4 years. So you imagine 10 years of just being on one farm to feel like you know what you're doing, which is pretty, I don't know, it's pretty crazy. So to have a beginning farmer training program in the area is, I think, really important. Santa Cruz is a really good example of that, of what they've been able to do there. And then we're also looking at doing a K through 12 garden partnership. We get a lot of calls from schools. I don't know if that's something that you all experience here too, but they're like, hey, can you come like start our garden and run it for us and like implement it? And we're like no, like we have 4.5 acres, like we got it, that's just not part of what we're able to do. But the students are really excited about kind of being able to do that. So we're looking at developing a training program for students to be able to go and do that kind of consulting work in K through 12 schools. So, because one of them is like, we have 23 schools in our system and we want to garden in every single school, and can you come and help and do it all? And we're like, ugh. So we have to start to build those programs to be able to do that. And then working on to secure the land. So the 1.5 acres that you see behind them, this is on one of our planting days, is the new acreage that we just got for the pantry. And so that's like more of a temporary thing. We're looking at getting that a little bit more permanent. And then, just continuing to host the art courses. One of the things that I thought was kind of exciting, if the people are interested in sustainable ag type work, there's a Sustainable Ag Education Association conference. This year it's in Hawaii. And so a lot of the interns are right now like fundraising to be able to go out there, which is really cool. They have it every 2 years in different places around the nation. And it's basically all the farm and garden programs from around the nation and different land-grant universities get together. So it's just a lot of fun for people that are interested in that type of thing. And then Hawaii's not bad, of course. So, and there's some really amazing work that's being done out there in terms of the indigenous communities out there working with the different local community colleges and colleges about doing a farm training program. I think they were starting more from the nonprofit side, moving into the university, where like what we're doing is starting from the university and moving from there. So it's just kind of a cool, different farm that we'll be able to get to check out in July. So I think with that, this is us on our planting day when we were getting all the new rows planted out. So this was back in March, I think. So people that haven't been to Riverside, that's what it looks like on a good day. Cool. So then I figured I'd just leave the rest for like questions and kind of comments on things. It sounds like y'all are trying to getting a garden started here, so I'm down to kind of, yeah.
So have you seen any like community change through, like after the garden has started and like everything, like have you seen any changes like on campus or like in the community?
Yeah, definitely. When we were starting our garden, there was only one other garden in the entire city, or one other community garden. And then since then, I want to say there's like 7 or 8 community gardens. So just within the span of maybe 5 years, there's been a huge, everything from churches to nonprofits, that type of thing. Also, Kaiser has kind of come in and started funding a lot of things too. So that food desert that I was mentioning, there's downtown and then UCR, and then in between is the east side. And so it's like, like in orientation, I think the police sometimes say don't go in this area, but it's just a lower socioeconomic area, majority Hispanic area, and that's the food desert that I was mentioning earlier. I think they have like 17 liquor stores, that type of thing, like just your kind of classic type of situation. And so Kaiser's started funding those programs now, and so they have been for at least the last 3 or 4 years. I think they put like $1 million or something like that into it. So they're starting to support what's going on in the area. And then the city's been a really big support too with the conference that they're doing. On campus, it's definitely interesting. There's a lot of different people that come out to the garden and are involved in it. So yeah, I think it definitely has changed quite a bit. I think the administration is one that's changed the most. I think students kind of get it for the most part. They understand it. Maybe they don't get the growing stuff. A lot of students, they come out to the garden, they're like, I've never seen a squash plant, or I've never seen an eggplant. I didn't know what that looked like. So there's that very hands-on kind of aspect of it. But I think in terms of changing minds and cultures, I think it's more the admin and faculty, where the students kind of, it doesn't take too much for them to understand what's going on. So just older ways, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
I had a question. So earlier you showed like a map that with different land use. Is
Oh, yeah.
that like public knowledge? Is there a way? Is that done like throughout the U.S.?
Oh, that's a good question. No, this was done internally. So Kier and the city of Riverside went on to commission this one. So you can see each one of those dates are actually different times when the city's kind of freaked out and it was like, what are we going to do with this 5,000 acres? And then they write a report, and this is kind of like the history that has been told to me by the city. They freak out, get together, like write a report, and then shelve it, and then come back, in '84, do the same thing, freak out, like what are we going to do with this area? Write a report, and then keep going. So that's why all of those dates are there. And so we're in the middle of that next freak out, essentially, of the city. But they've actually invested a lot more in it this time around. So this is, it's not something that I don't think most cities would probably, they'll have land use stuff, but not necessarily on this level, I don't think. And then we are pretty unique in that I think we're the only city in Southern California that has 5,000 acres in like protected agriculture. It's a really unique thing. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think I like being out in Riverside is that like, there's a lot of little like hidden secret and gems. The other is this gauge canal that feeds all the 5,000 acres. It comes from our own water source and our own aquifer. So when California was going through that whole drought and everyone's like reducing, and like LA, I think they have 11% of their own water. So all of it is coming from the north. And so they're freaking out when that happens, but we get, I think like 80 to 90% of our own water from our own aquifer, which is like, we're not like San Diego, we're not like LA in that way. So, and I don't think most people know that. So as everyone was freaking out, we weren't. Our city tried to sue the state and say like, we don't need to like conserve water because we have our own. Like that's probably not the best way to do it. Like you don't want to do that, but so there's a lot of really kind of unique things to Riverside in that way.
I also wanted to ask, so is the our garden also in this green belt, and did the university like already own that land, or how did they get access?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, so this is all privately held land for the most part. The green area is kind of the state citrus park, and then everything else is all privately owned. And so if you were to drive through here, you would see a lot of citrus groves, a lot of vacant land, and then a lot of kind of like mini mansions, essentially. And so that was, they restricted what could be built on there, so it was just like a home. You could do one home and per 5 acres, and you had to have a certain amount of trees or something on there, or some kind of agricultural productivity to get special rates and that type of thing. So if you look at this one, that little wedge is here, and then the university is right over there. And yeah, so that's probably, so from the university to that first red dot is about 3 miles. And so you can kind of see it's a little bit more than that, probably like 10 miles. There have been people that have wanted to kind of like give land to the university for research functions and stuff like that, like as a donation. That hasn't happened that I know of, but so it is a little separate. But again, it's like I think we have all these different resources within the city itself, and it just seems to kind of like a natural fit. That kind of goes back to sustainability and the gender and sexuality studies too, of like what's valued. And so there's like one idea of what sustainability was to just basically ship everything overseas to Asian markets and get like $8 per pound more. And that was their idea of sustainability. But then there's like Kaiser and food deserts and all this other stuff. We were like, well, we could do so much more with that 5,000 acres for the city and for the community here. So that's what we're kind of like, what gets valued is different when you're looking at it from kind of more of a gender, sexuality studies, and sustainability perspective than just a strict like, what is it, like economic way. So yeah. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Could I get your contact info later to ask some follow-up questions for a research project?
Oh, cool. Yeah, definitely. I have cards here and everything. Yeah. And actually, I did I didn't mention this earlier, but I did my undergrad on the history of my undergrad thesis on the history of UC gardens across the whole system. So I have like a little background on all the different gardens that started. And it's kind of interesting. We have like Santa Cruz, Davis, Berkeley all started gardens back in the 60s and 70s. And there's a lot of like things going on in the 60s and 70s. And then around like the 2008 and that whole economic crisis, that's when like UCLA, Irvine, Riverside, and all these other gardens started popping up. So these are like the two times when the garden started. And in looking at the missions statements of all the different gardens, they all have very similar like both environmental and political kind of missions to them, which I thought was really interesting. But just an idea of like what I've done in the past for research on that too. So, but yeah, I'd love to talk about that.